Hey everybody, this is Talkative Carl back again for another comic book review. And finally, I am coming getting to a Spider-Man comic. I got I'm talking about how much I'm a huge Spider-Man fan and have yet to do a comic book review since I've done comic book reviews of Spider-Man. I've done like Moon Knight and Batman, uh, and Superman and Green Lantern. It's like I have not done a Spider-Man one, and I wanted to do one for my first comic book review of the new year, and I figured like it has to be the first one has to be a Spider-Man thing. So I had to. It's so much to choose from, but I figure I want to make it short, sweet, to the point, nothing too crazy. I want to do one for Peter Parker. Eventually, I want to do one for Miles Morales, Gwen, Noir, 2099, and Spider Ham. And there is a Penny Parker, but she's only in like a brief image. It's not like a full blown comic, which is weird. After Spider Verse, you would think there will be like a jump on making sure like these characters have so much writers making like arcs for them, but no. But there is a manga version of universe for Spider-Man, so I want to read that instead, so I can get the Japanese version. So that's my overall plan for the next series of comic book reviews. I'm going to go through each universe Spider-Man with like a certain arcs they went through. But I want to start off with something simple with Peter Parker. And we'll do this one. Kind of piqued my interest because I never heard of this. It's The Amazing Spider-Man: Spirits of the Earth, written and the art by Charles Vess. And the story begins where you have Peter Parker going through his regular patrols in New York, stopping crime along the way. And in this time frame, this is like early 90s when this was written. So he's still with Mary Jane. They're like, still newlyweds and everything like that. In this interpretation, or at least in the one written by Charles Vess, who I think is Scottish, because this story is pretty much heavily going to be centered in Scotland, where Mary Jane and Peter go to Scotland because Mary Jane's aunt, who's apparently Scottish, who we never heard of before. Like I said, depending on the writer, can just make up any BS relative, who passed away and left her a place in Scotland. So she went and traveled to handle certain personal effects and everything like that. So it's kind of like as Peter called it, a second honeymoon in a way. So they go to, they get their bearings once they, land in Scotland and meet up with the local folk. And of course, there's this local legend that, it's very Scooby-Doo-ish. You'll know what I'm talking about as I'm carrying on. But the locals believe, the moors have been haunted by these spirits, and this particular clan, who's there's like a lost child in a way, but they figure like these what they call the fairy folk had kidnapped the child, but his local old woman. You know how in Scooby-Doo there's always that old geezer that's like warning people. There's this old woman who looks creepy, but she's a good person. But she says like, no, it's not the work of the fairy folk. It's something more serious. Something more to it. And then you got these developers who are trying to get these people off their land so they can like pretty much bulldoze an entire place. Like I said, it's very Scooby-Doo. We want to Scooby-Doo this crap. So Peter goes on the investigation, goes to the manor of there's this guy named Angus and his and I'm pretty sure it was like his uncle, who's pretty much like the because it's just these three people. Like the youngest one who was kidnapped, Angus, who's pretty much like a jackass, who's trying to pretty much put like the moves on Mary Jane, very sexually harassy. But then there's this like the older gentleman who's pretty much like the last patriarch, and as Peter's going through this castle just to investigate, he come across these ghosts who he just, okay, what the hell do I have to, like, he's pretty much like, figure he's out of his depths at this point. He literally tried to like talk with these, guys, and it's like, but obviously they're not listening. So one grew, this particular one in the image grew to the size of the castle and like took a swipe with a sword and like crumbled a piece of a tower, and Peter nearly they just dodging it, and then like eventually like the ghosts, as you turn around they're gone. So he heads back to like the tavern where him and Mary Jane are shacked up, and so as like the local people are trying to like decide how do we handle these developers, and since like the patrons want to leave everything to the youngest child, because the oldest one, Angus, who nobody wants to leave the clan, who they don't think he's fit, and they figure like, okay, we'll get to the give it to the child, but now the child's gone. Without that, it seems like it's kind of like which is kind of weird. I mean, this is in the early 90s. I don't think anybody. Well, there's a few, but it's like it's not. They don't treat like reservations in a way. It's kind of like Native Americans with their reservations. They don't treat it as seriously like they ought to. So it's kind of similar when you get these developers who don't. They feel like, okay, just a little more time, we can just get what we want from this land. So Peter talks with the old woman and trying to get some tips from her. I was like, okay, like how's the best to tell me more about these what's going on here. And for a brief moment, you think like he's seeing like Mary Jane, but it's just like there's a little bit more mysticism, a little light of a mysticism here, where it's like he think he's seeing things, but it's just like the old woman who thought he was Mary Jane for a split second, and she regales him with tales of like the local lands and how important it is to the people, and of course, the people are like having like their little meeting, and he's trying to like a couple of them try to appeal to the rest of them, like, hey, you cannot allow them to like take our lands. It's like, very important to us, despite what they are trying to like pay them off or whatever like that. And then as the meeting ends, they get like attacked by like all these spirits, and unfortunately, since Peter, who was eavesdropping at Spider-Man, people are looking up, on top of the building, seeing him, accusing him of being like a demon. It's kind of like Nightcrawler, like the early origins of Nightcrawler's story, where because he actually looks like a demon despite his good nature. They just assume, which like you never heard of freaking Spider-Man. It's very weird. It's like at this point in narration of Spider-Man, it's kind of like out of continuity, in continuity. You can easily fit it in like the main continuity. Spider-Man is part of his history. It's just kind of like DC Elseworlds. It's like Batman Long Halloween, you can easily fit it into the narrative of his, Batman's history. Similar to this, you can easily fit into Spider-Man's history. They're in Scotland. It's early 90s, so it's fair to say that he's been Spider-Man since he's married and he's, full-grown adult, not in school anymore. It should be like the word should have gotten around about like Spider-Man, but I guess it's not as famous as someone like Iron Man or Captain America, who's easily recognizable around the globe. But I don't know. But because of these like weird spirits that come out of nowhere, it's kind of really confusing Peter at first. It's like, oh, okay, we're dealing with actual freaking ghosts. He's thinking at first. But being a man of science, he's hard pressed to just go full tilt into that. But then he's getting chased by the locals, thinking he's a demon. They come in with pitchforks and everything like that. Despite Mary Jane trying to do her best to calm the crowd down, but it wasn't until like the old woman who comes to just pretty much everybody just got pretty much like lend her their ears and. They're just like, way of, just the way she like, almost like Captain America when it comes to or Superman, when they talk, people listen. And it's similar to here, like when she talks, she's the elder, pretty much. So people listen, to her straight away. So they all disperse and go home. And she already knew that he was, Peter Parker. So there was like no subterfuge here. So she takes him and Mary Jane to this Riverside Canyon where, at least back to the castle near like a cliffside. And Peter goes inside to look deeper, more so than he had the chance to do so previously because of the surprise ghost. So this time he realized, okay, these are freaking holograms. They're obviously not like actual ghosts. So he looks further deeper and he sees Hellfire Club members running experiments on this machine with this gigantic diamond overhead. And it turns out Angus is working for the who wants to run this part of Scotland himself. That's why he was secretly trying to take over and do their developments and everything like that, because he to prove himself to the Hellfire Club, because he wants power and all this stuff the Hellfire Club at the time was given out to members or people who are extremely loyal to the club. And so to prove his membership, he's trying to utilize this crystal to connect to like the satellite. So pretty much allowing the Hellfire Club to, allow further reach into the world. And so he's pretty much allowed certain members of, get, grunts of the Hellfire Club under his leadership to like, okay, get this done. We'll give you some men, and like if you pull this off, you're gonna be one of us. Of course, Spider-Man ends up trying to stop them, but gets knocked out and then put in a cage along with Angus's father or uncle. I can't remember which. He's in there injured because it's like laser field cage that end up burning his hand after you try to touch it. So Angus pretty much like utilizing, or at least threatening to kill the kid. I don't know why he's haven't killed him yet. I think he's waiting for a certain point where he's like officially dubbed like head of the clan before he does the deed or whatever. Thanks to like I said, there's a bit of mysticism here, but thanks to like the old woman and with Mary Jane helping along with like this chant, it causes kind of like a tremor that kind of disrupts the force field, allows Spider-Man and the Patriarch to escape. Spider-Man, who is taking down these grunts, but he's too preoccupied with like he's typical Spider-Man telling jokes and like fooling around a bit instead of like taking these guys out in like quick succession. Uh, one of them got like a shot off from a gun that misses Spider-Man, but clips the Patriarch, and he falls over, and like like his last breath, like protect the kid, save the kid, and he dies. And this kind of like really gets to Spider-Man because he was joshing around for too much. He once again lost because he sees this guy. He sees his Uncle Ben again, and he's like not again. But it's not the same. When I read this, it's like, dude, it's not the same. Last time you didn't do anything. You're actually doing something. You just had your hands full, and one of them just got off a lucky shot. But knowing Spider-Man, it's still his responsibility, so he's taking all that on himself. So he finally reaches towards Angus, who's starting to toss the kid over the ravine, and it's like at this point he's too freaking far gone because he's like just literally like willing to like kill a kid just to join the Hellfire Club. And here's the thing: the kid doesn't say much. You don't hear like maybe not whiny, but it's just like not leave me alone. It's like stop it or anything. He just like he don't hear a peep. It's like there's no written dialogue for this kid. It's not like you need like a whole thing with the kid, but it's like so the kid seemed like he could have just been like not there at all. But it's just trying to add some urgency to the situation. But as Peter got the Peter's like severely weakened. He's like there was like a collapse in the hideout, falling rocks and everything like that, and then he got into this brawl with these henchmen. He's like exhausted and wounded, and now this normal dude who's pretty much like giving him the business, but Spider-Man finally deals with them and then saves a kid, but not realizing he failed the Hellfire Club and knowing what they usually do with people who fail them, he decides to just jump off the cliff and ends up killing himself. And like he saves Peter saves the kid, stops the Hellfire Club from like pretty much taking over this land. And so this adventure kind of like it's like I said, it was pretty short. It's like a nice little short story of an adventure in Scotland, pretty much Scooby-Dooing this crap. And it's cool. It's like it's not like the biggest Spider-Man story, but like I said, I wanted to do something short and sweet, and this kind of piqued my interest when I and Spears of Darius. I'm like, what's this about? And you would think it had to be something with like Ghost Rider or something like that, but no, it's just a normal story. Just you putting Spider-Man out of his element into another country, very far from home, if you ask me. And not only that, it's not even just far from home. He's like in like a middle of like the moors of Scotland, where there's barely any buildings. He's can't swing anywhere, so traveling is proves very difficult for him to maneuver, and he doesn't know the landscape of the area as well as he does with New York. So he's severely at a disadvantage, but still managed to come out ahead. But it's still a fun ride. It's a decent story, but the art is very storybook. If you see like because at least to me it's kind of like very storybookish, like you see like in like a Snow White or whatever kind of stories. It's like just the way it's drawn. I don't know if Charles Vess ever did anything else beyond this. I'm pretty sure he has. This is like early 90s. It's fair to say he probably had a hand in a few comic books since then. But I mean, Spirits of Earth is like a decent story. If you want, it's like if you want to get like an inkling or get like your first Spider-Man book or something, beyond like the origin story. If you want like a short little tale, Spider-Man and his adventures. This is a decent story. Not as big as like people, a lot of people complain, and I do every so often about like these cataclysmic events. Like the Spider-Verse and dealing with the vampire energy sucking vampires like Morlun, or like the clone sagas or whatever like that. It's like overly complicated kind of stories where it's like, no, this is like a simple story of dealing with shady developers who are trying to take some people's lands and finding this kid. And, and you get like a little familiar villain like the Hellfire Club, but not like specific. You get silhouettes of like Sebastian Shaw, but, but just for a brief moment, is not anything to do with Sebastian Shaw or Emma Frost in the Hellfire Club. You just see silhouettes of them, but this is pretty much, you see their grunts, so they're like extensively associated with this. So, but yeah, just a one-off villain, nice little short story. There's certain images like this cover is pretty cool. Like something about this I actually do like. It's just simplistic kind of art detail, but certain images is very storybookish. It's like I don't hate it. It's very middle of the road for me, and it's not a kind of art that blows my mind either. So, but it's pretty decent Spider-Man story. Just recommend it just to get your feet wet into like a Spider-Man story, or if you're tired of just these big grand scale adventures of Spider-Man that's kind of overly complicated, when you want to be like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who's just doing like these short little adventures, is very intimate and like and not bombastic. This is the kind of story you want to read just to wet your whistle. So that way, if you're feeling too bogged down with all this clone stuff, and you don't need to deal with all this space, or Thanos blowing up the Earth or some crap like that. If you're done with that kind of stuff for a while, pick something like this up. Just to get like a nice little refresher. And it's like, this stands the reason why you love comic books, just for these nice little short little tales. But anyway, that is my little short review for a Spider-Man comic book. It's just for Peter Parker. I will eventually get like another Peter Parker comic at some point down the line, but this is short. I just wanted to get something in. It was between this and Peter Parker's first fight with Morlun, when he meets that older man who has similar spider powers as him for the first time. When he's dealing with that kind of stuff for the first time. It's like, I was looking for that and I saw this, and it's like, you know what? I'll handle that at another time when I'm probably get around to the Spider-Verse comic book series. When I get around to that eventually, I'll read that as like a prelude into that. But I want to do with these short tales with these different Spider folks. That has nothing to do with the overall big stuff. So anyway, I will see you guys next time. I think I'll do Noir next. I'll do a Spider-Man Noir next, and then maybe 2099, and just go from there. So anyway, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to Talkative Carl. Links are in the description.